The year is 1770. Britain's northeastern American colonies are in civil unrest. The main reason is the Townshend Acts, tax on tea, lead, glass, paper, and paint, and to help the British government's large debt after the 7 Years' War. It proved to only backfire, with Whigs, also known as patriots, a term for Americans who opposed the British, often forming large mobs to attack tax collectors and ransack their homes. Other frustrated colonists took to smuggling tea and other tax goods into the 13 colonies from the Netherlands, France, and Spain. Trade with countries outside of Britain was banned under the Navigation Acts and had been over 100 years. The situation was getting so out of hand, Britain sent around 2,000 soldiers to Boston, a very large amount just to enforce order. One out of every 5 people in Boston is now a soldier. March the 5th, 1770, 9 p.m., Boston. British Private Hugh White has been stationed outside of the Custom Building on King Street. Thin snow covered the dark streets as White stood next to the guard box. The silence was broken when a group of patriots moved into the streets. Approaching White, they started to shout insults and surround the soldier. White responded by striking one with his musket. In turn, the patriots started lobbing snowballs, stones, oysters, and clubs at him. White quickly called for help, and the nearby Captain Thomas Preston, along with 7 other soldiers, formed a semicircle around the Custom Building, pointing their bayonets outward, Private Hugh White joining them. Captain Preston stood in between his men and the crowd, trying to mediate, when Private Montgomery was struck with a club from a local merchant, Richard Palms. He collapsed onto the ground, only to rise to his feet and fire into the crowd. Captain Preston wheeled around to ask why he had fired when he was struck in the arm by Richard, paralyzing it for some time. As this happened, the other British soldiers opened fire into the crowd. Cypress Attucks, who was shot in the chest, died there. Samuel Gray, who died instantly from a bullet to the head, and James Cadwell, who was shot twice and fell to die in the street, with Patrick Carr and Samuel Maverick being mortally wounded, both passing away by March 14th. The Patriots momentarily backed off before the church bell started to ring. Normally that would signal a fire in town, so thousands of Bostonians took to the streets, only to find what looked to be dead men with British soldiers standing over them. Outraged, the crowd grew and continued to harass the soldiers. Captain Preston quickly called for the majority of the regiment to deploy into the streets. British soldiers formed lines in the streets and a standoff continued until 10 p.m. The acting governor came out on the state building's balcony and promised that the soldiers would be prosecuted by a civilian court.
Let the law take its course.
This was able to convince the Bostonians to return to their homes. This event would be known as the Boston Massacre. The 9 soldiers were arrested and sent to jail the following morning. The trials were delayed for some time to allow Boston to cool down. When they finally began, John Adams, despite being a famous patriot lawyer, defended the soldiers. During the trial, Adams stated that,
Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence, nor is the law less stable than the fact. If an assault was made to endanger their lives, the law is clear. They had the right to kill in their own defense.
Captain Preston, whose trial was separate from the regular soldiers, was found not guilty after 6 days. It was proved that he did not order his men to fire on the crowd. In their trials, attention shifted to something the mortally wounded Patrick Carr had stated. He did not blame the soldiers for firing, and that back in Ireland, his home, he had seen British soldiers fire on crowds for half as much as they received here. After 9 days, 6 of the 8 soldiers were found not guilty, but 2 of the soldiers, Montgomery and Matthew Kilroy, were found guilty. To get out of a death sentence, they used an old legal privilege given to those who could prove they were literate, called benefit of clergy. Using benefit of clergy, the men's sentences were reduced to having their thumbs branded with the letter M for manslaughter. This would ensure that they could never invoke the benefit of clergy again, as they were marked. They were soon released back to their regiments. A month after the massacre, the taxes on paper, lead, glass, and paint were lifted, but the tax on tea remained, and smuggled tea continued to be less expensive than British tea. In 1773, Britain passed the Tea Act, which was meant to allow the struggling British East India Company to ship its tea straight to America. Before this act, the British East India Company was forced to sail from India to Britain, then sell it to a middleman, who would then sail it to America and sell it. This was one of the main reasons British tea was more expensive than the smuggled tea. So after the Tea Act was passed, British tea became very cheap in the 13 colonies. So cheap, it was outselling the smuggled tea. American smugglers started to lose lots of money and needed a way to make people buy their tea again. So they started to push that by buying British tea, they were submitting to British taxes, bringing up the taxation without representation issue again. They also said that they were betraying their fellow Americans because they bought British tea. This tactic proved to be very effective. Some cities started boycotting British tea imports, which will bring us to a future video set in 1773.
Oh, U.S. free, for who are so free as the sons of the way. Ah, to vote, our ships, jolly tars are our men. We always are ready. Stay, boys, stay.